Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome into Uncle Jimmy's podcast. Today, we have a great guest. I want you to buckle up because today on the podcast, we're diving into something real, something raw, something that hits right in the chest. My guest today is Kevin Fink, a man who's walked through the fire and come out the other side, not with polished platitudes, but with hard earned wisdom and a no excuses approach to healing. On the outside, like all of us, Kevin had it all together: a solid career, respect, the kind of life that looks unbreakable from afar. But inside, he was carrying decades of shame, guilt, and old stories that were quietly steering every decision, every relationship, every moment of self doubt. It built up until one day he stood inches from stepping in front of a speeding freight train because the weight of what he had refused to face finally became too much to bear. That moment didn't break him, it woke him up. Kevin turned that darkness into his calling. Now, through Life Wizard coaching, he helps others do the same. Face the emotional trauma, the self-sabotage, the money blocks, the burnout, the pressure to always be the strong one. All the stuff we pretend isn't there until it runs our lives. No surface level motivation here, just truth, vulnerability, and the real work of rebuilding from the inside out. Kevin, thank you for being here, for showing up ready to go unfiltered, and for trusting us with your journey. We're honored, man. Let's get into it.
All right, buddy. Thank you, Jimmy. I'm grateful to be here and looking forward to the conversation, man.
I'm excited. So just tell people a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what it was like growing up where you were, and then we'll get
Yeah,
into some questions.
sure. So, as Jimmy mentioned, my name's Kevin Fink. I grew up in a small town in Midwest, Western Illinois, right on the border between Illinois and Iowa, a place called the Quad Cities. If you're familiar with John Deere, a tractor company, we're the home of John Deere. So if that gives you an idea. And I grew up in I'll say an upper middle class family. My parents were self-employed. They had a wholesale candy distributorship and, lived a decent life. Uh,
Nice. Does that mean you had all the candy you could have as a kid?
Unfortunately, yes, fortunately and unfortunately. So we always had candy. So I was always a little fat kid.
So Kev, what was your favorite candy?
That's a hard question. Snickers, all the chocolate we had. So although it wasn't anything like Willy Wonka,
Yeah.
we actually had a air conditioned part of our warehouse where we had all the chocolate. So M&Ms and Snickers, probably my two favorite candies from my childhood.
You had no Oompa Loompas running around though?
No, I was the Oompa Loompa. When Dad said shit needed to get done, I didn't get to sing little songs and dance around. I got my ass to work.
Come with me and you'll see, right? And here comes Kevin, Snickers, some M&Ms in his pocket,
You got it, man.
That sounds great. That sounds like a lot of fun,
It was fun. And, it was also hard because, I've been self-employed for the last 30 years. We'll get into that. But, having parents that were self-employed, one of the challenges was that work never ended. A lot of people who are 9 to 5 or have, real jobs or, are employed by somebody else. They're, for the most part, they're able to, come home, take their shoes off and pick it back up tomorrow morning. Well, it never ended. And so that was kind of hard sometimes.
Yeah, so work was always home with them too,
It was. And because they worked together, they never had any time apart. And so lots of bickering, lots of yelling. Yelling was the primary methodology of communication
Yeah.
in our house. So if it wasn't being said in a loud voice, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah. So take us, how many brothers and sisters? Any siblings?
Yeah. So I have, so that's kind of a loaded question, but I'll tell you the math and then I'll quickly give you the story. So legally, I have an older sister and a younger sister and an older brother. So my older sister is a half sister. Technically, I have two older half sisters, but one of them chose to be adopted by her stepdad and her mom when she was 16. And so she's technically not part of our family anymore, which was added a whole nother layer of shame and guilt and unresolved emotional trauma to my childhood. We all have, we all have shit in our lives, Jimmy. And, it may not look the same in our bodies. It's the same. It affects us And, whatever area of life it might be, it's the biggest problem that we all have that until we learn how to deal with it, unfortunately, our futures are pretty predictable in those areas. And
Yeah.
hopefully we'll get into that.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people, like I was saying in your introduction, right? Everybody looks great on the outside. Everybody's doing well, but, like me, myself, I got a great job. I've been doing it 20 years. I've been in the same industry for 20 plus years now. I'm 41 years old. So right out of high school, I started, and, it's been great. But I've had a divorce, a breakup, a heartbreak, after heartbreak after heartbreak. And a lot of my things, I think, that I'm learning now that I'm processing it and reading about it and, putting pen to paper, also seeing therapists as well. I've been seeing therapists for 16 plus years. But, when you start taking stock, right, you look yourself in the mirror and you get truth. You get truthful with yourself, right?
Yeah.
The honesty hits you and you look yourself in the mirror and you say, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep shouldering the load. I can't keep carrying this weight. And I don't know if you were like me, but I tended to take everything and just push it down, push it down, push it down, right? Wake up. Every day was Groundhog Day. Every day was the same thing, same routine, same breakfast, same work schedule. For me, I was working 100 plus hours a week. You know, that's all I knew. That's all I knew. Then I got divorced. I tried to get in a relationship, and that just blew up because I was so used to working, making the money. And then I was trying to do different things, and I wasn't the man that I could be,
Yep.
and I'm realizing that now that, there were conversations that I should have had, conversations that we should have had together as a couple, and we didn't because, I would push that aside and be very avoidant, let's say, you
Yeah.
know?
And that as men, that's what we were taught as children. Most American men, traditionally, we were handed down a belief system by people who it had been handed down to them, of, men don't show emotion,
Yeah,
men don't cry, real men don't, that real men just stuff it down, put up with
exactly.
it.
Yeah,
And as a result of those stories, shit happens, right?
exactly. Yeah.
I've been divorced twice myself, and interestingly, so my first marriage, my first ex-wife, or as I like to refer to her as my first practice wife, she told me on my 25th birthday that she didn't want to be married, which was kind of interesting.
Wow.
And that was really my first wake up call from a relationship standpoint. And it's interesting something that you said, it's about looking at the mirror. It's about having a willingness to say, what did I bring to this? How did I contribute to this? Unfortunately, in our country today, very few people are willing to accept personal responsibility for the shit in their lives. They just
Yeah.
want to look for somebody to blame.
We just
And,
want to point the
yeah,
finger, you know?
exactly, point the finger. It's so much easier to say, "You fucked up. It's
Yeah.
your fault," right? Versus, "What did I bring to this?" And what's interesting was that we all model other people's behavior. So, what's I've learned, so I've been in financial services for 30 years now. I've been in personal growth and leadership development for about 17. And so I've done a lot of self-reflection and a lot of looking. And one of the things that we talk about, Jimmy, is that when children, up to the time that children are about 7 years old, they are little sponges.
Yeah.
And everything that they learn about the real world and about their belief system is installed from the people who they see as authorities in their lives, their parents, their grandparents, their teachers, the clergy, whoever it is that tells them this is how the world works.
Yeah.
And by the time they're 7 years old, 45% of their lifelong belief system has now been locked into place.
It's already been locked in and created. Wow, I didn't know that.
Yep. And by the
Yeah.
time they're somewhere between 18 and 22 years old, 99% of their belief system, what they believe, how the world works, and how they're gonna operate for the rest of their lives, 99% has been firmly locked in before they've really ever had a chance to experience much of anything in the world, or look at it and question, why is that the way it is? They
The way
just
it
take it
is.
as the truth.
Yeah.
So when I looked at my first marriage, I was like, well, why didn't she want to be married to me anymore? Well, it was probably because I yelled and screamed and we argued and I said nasty things to her. And when I look back, That's the same shit my parents did.
Yeah,
But
mom and
that
dad did.
was but that was my model of what marriage was supposed to be. And it wasn't until I accepted some responsibility like, "Oh, well, if I don't wanna have this happen again, I'm gonna have to choose to behave differently. I'm gonna have to choose whether or not." And so why? Why would I say things like that to the person I, in theory, love more than
Love.
anything in the world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it's that willing it would have been very easy to just point the finger at her and say, "No, she's a bitch, and, whatever.
It's
I'm
all her.
perfect," right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the challenges that I see in the world today, and it's prevalent, man. You and I were talking before we started here about the media. There's no, and I know you're a politics guy, and I don't really want to get into politics, but the whole thing about there is no personal responsibility on either side of the aisle
Of the
in
aisle, yeah.
politics today. It's always blame the other guy, woman, party.
Yep.
It's never my fault,
No.
right?
No.
And at some point in any relationship, there's always two people.
Yep.
Neither of those two people are perfect. And when both sides learn to accept some personal responsibility for the actions and what they bring, and having some vulnerability, like telling the truth, telling
Yeah.
the dirty truth, and we'll get into some vulnerability here.
Or lack thereof what they don't bring to the table, you know?
Exactly.
And not just in politics, because both sides think that they're the greatest and they're the best.
Right. Yeah. And it's yeah. So
It's
here we
and it's
are,
terrible,
right?
you know?
And I
Now,
think
how do you identify, Kevin? How do you identify in politics
so in politics, I am about as middle of the road as you can get.
as you can go?
It's interesting. So my parents were Democrats,
Yeah.
and from the time I got to college up until, frankly, up until this last election, I was staunch Republican from a voting perspective.
Yeah.
But if I were to go to either party and say, "Here's what I could bring to your party," there are things that I believe that either party would go, "Yeah, we don't want you.
Yeah, exactly.
We're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
interested," right?
And I think both parties are so out of touch nowadays with the American public. Both parties, right? And
Absolutely.
I think, I could be wrong. So your parents, right, were probably Kennedy era Democrats, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. You
For
know,
sure.
and now you don't have any of that, right? You just have both sides, I think, who don't want to work with the other side, whether you're Republican, Democrat, no side wants to work. There's no bipartisanship.
That's right.
And I say it, right? When you get to DC, first off, being a congressman, being a senator, you should be proud of being in that position, right? The people have spoken. The people have basically put you on this pedestal to say, hey, you're the one that's going to speak for us, right?
That's right.
But then they get there and they start speaking for special interests. They start speaking for big pharma. They start speaking for big oil. They forget about, little Kevin and little Jimmy. They forget about us,
Of course.
you know? And
Part of that I believe. So here's Kevin politics beliefs 101. Two things. Two-party system way outlived its usefulness.
no
There
doubt.
there needs to be some more centrist party. And so if you'd asked me 2 years ago, how did I align? I would have said I'm a libertarian. I don't want the government in my bedroom. I don't think the government should do much of anything. And the problem with the Libertarian Party is they got some wacky fuckers up at the top that they keep putting, I mean, certifiably crazy people that I just can't vote for, right? And so, but if you ask me, like how would I like my government to operate, it probably would have been that.
Yeah.
Now I'm middle of the road, probably lean a little bit more left now than I used to, but there are some things where I'm very conservative, where I believe, we should be fiscally conservative, but I'm also okay with same-sex marriage and
Yeah.
taking care of poor people, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And here's the other thing I believe. The problem with our two-party system and the reason nobody wants to talk anymore is that we are now catering to both extremes. We
Exactly.
cater to the far left and we cater to the far right. And that's the only place that black and white exist is at the extreme. So that's where it's binary. You're either with me or you're against me.
Yeah.
And the majority of America is not black and white. The majority of America is shades of gray, somewhere around the middle.
In the middle. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
anyway, so that's as much as and that's what I had to say about that.
And Kev, my big thing, right? I say that we should have three parties, right? And people laugh at me when I say this. The third party should be the working party, the working class of America. Let us let us take it back and show, the politicians of what it's like, because once they go to DC, a lot of them forget where they come from. They forget the districts that they represent. They forget, Jimmy in Dorchester, and they forget Kevin, out in, Iowa,
Iowa, yeah, for
and
sure.
they forget us, and that's the thing is that we as Americans, we need to all hold our politicians' feet to the fire, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, independent, because at the end of the day, right, we're supposed to be the greatest country in the world, but yet we have veterans who are homeless that
Yep,
live on the street. We
yep.
have children, right, that go to bed hungry. We still don't have, medical. We still don't have
Okay.
medical health care for all of us,
Yep.
So if we're the greatest country in the world, we need to act like it, and we need to stop with the sound clips and stop putting pressure, right? And stop putting those actions
That's
into
that's it.
place where we can start doing it,
That's it.
and screw the party, you know?
The only way I think that ever could happen, Jimmy, is if we get term limits.
Yeah,
Because it back when the founders framed the Constitution, politician was not a job description.
yeah,
Politician was your obligation to go represent, you were a farmer or a teacher or a lawyer or a doctor, and you did your duty. You went there and represented your people, and then when your time was done, you went back to farming and teaching and all those things, and it was somebody else's turn. But
yeah.
as soon as we gave them the ability to control the purse and to pay themselves and to get reelected, why do we have politicians who have been in that office for 50 years? What
It's
what
crazy.
ideas, what new ideas do they bring to the table?
Yeah.
None.
Look, and this is nothing against Joe Biden or Donald Trump, right? And I'm saying this just from my perspective. Do we really think as a country that Donald Trump, who's going to be 80 years old, Joe Biden, who I think is a little over 80 years old or close to 80,
Yep.
are the best two candidates that we have to run our country? No, no. But I think also, like you said, when it comes to term limits, right? People get scared because they say, oh, a 40-something-year-old is president, or, 45-year-old is president. Yeah, what does he know? And I think it goes off those lines of, you have those 60, 70-year-old people that look at that and say, he's too young. So they go with the older guy, right? He
Yep.
knows what he's doing. And I say it all the time. And then we'll get into some questions for you. So politics is like dirty pool, right? That's what my grandfather used to say. Politics is dirty pool. Everybody's there. They're all making tons of money. They're all getting these special interest groups that are taking care of them, and maybe not in their pockets but in their coffers, right? Anybody can go on and look and see what these people have in their coffers, right? And I think it was billions of dollars the Trump Biden and, well, Trump Harris election was spent on ads and all that.
Yeah.
Billion plus dollars, right? What about taking that billion plus and investing it back into the company?
Right.
We don't need to spend billions of dollars. We already know, so Kevin, take us back to that moment, right? When you were on the tracks, what was going through your mind in those final seconds before you stepped back?
I'm happy to go there. Let me take a short step back before that to tell you what got me there, and then I'm happy
What
to
got you
share.
there? Yeah.
So it was September 18th of 2019, about 8 o'clock at night. I was in my house with my wife. Nothing big had happened that day. No financial crisis. Nothing had happened with the family. As far as I knew, it was a normal day. And at some point, my heart started racing. I couldn't breathe right. My head was just I couldn't pull a coherent thought together. It was just I knew something wasn't right, and I was jittery. And I said to my wife, I said, I don't know what's going on with me right now, but I need to get out of here. And she said, what do
Yeah.
you mean? I said, I just need to go. She said, well, go where? I said, I don't know, but I need to get out of here. And I'm going to go for a walk. And when I got outside, I decided, you know what, I don't want to walk. I'd rather ride my bicycle. And so I got on my bike and I just started riding. And I was crying, and the things that were going through my head, the stories that were going through my head were things like, you're a loser. You're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
You're a fraud. Your dad was right. You can't handle money. All of all these and I don't want to say voices. It wasn't like I was hearing voices, but the little voice in my head was not very positive. And what I didn't realize, that I came to realize later, is that I was having a panic attack.
Attack, yeah.
I'd never had one before, so I didn't know that's what it felt like. And all I knew was that I was feeling a tremendous amount of shame and guilt, and it was all about money. And as I mentioned a little bit ago, I w- at that point I had been in financial planning for 25 years, about 20 of those as a certified financial planner. So not only had I helped my own clients, but I had also run a CFP, a certified financial planning program, where I had taught other advisors how to deal with money, how to teach their clients what to do with money. So I clearly knew what to do with money, strategies, and yet every time money showed up in my life of any significant amount whatsoever, I didn't think of it this way, but I would get rid of it as quickly as I could.
As you could, yeah.
And I had and at that point, I had blown through not one, but two life-changing amounts of money in the forms of inheritances
Okay.
with nothing to show for it. And so what was going on was, here I am meeting with clients telling them this is what you should do with your money, but I didn't have any money because I
Yeah.
had blown it, I'd blown through it. Now, we had some fun. We went on some trips and but I didn't have any assets to show for it. And that story caused me to take an action that I would have never logically decided.
Yeah.
So that's what's going on. I'm just riding my bike randomly. I'm crying. And about an hour later, I found myself at our little downtown area. So I was living just outside of Chicago, one of the little western suburbs of Chicago. And I found myself down in our little downtown by the railroad tracks. And I, I, I didn't have any intention of doing anything. And then I heard the train whistle. And I could see down the track, I could see the train was a few stops away, and I could see the light, hear the whistle, and it started to cross my mind that, you know, if I just if I just do this, it could all go away.
Yep.
And the question, so to getting to your specific question, what was going through my head, just prior, not only was it all those negative stories, but the next thing that went through my head was, maybe the life insurance proceeds will make up for all the mistakes.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, you know, my wife will be okay, my kids will be okay. There's it's over $1 million of insurance, and I could just make all the pain stop
Yeah. All the pain go
and
away.
make it go away. And the train was getting closer. When something that big and heavy is moving that fast, it pushes the air in front of it. So I could feel it coming. I could feel the air before it ever got there. And as I was standing next to the tracks, I could hear the horn again. I could hear the bells ringing. I could see the lights flashing. I looked up. I could actually see the engineer's horrified look on his face, because he knew what was about to happen, and he's laying on the horn like, "Get away from the tracks, get away from the tracks." I could smell the grease from the wheels.
Yep. You can hear the wheels on the
I
tracks.
hear the wheels. I feel the vibration in the ground,
Feel it. Yep. Yep.
and I literally I was ready to take that step. And here's the answer to your question. Some other voice in my head said, "No, you are not your mistakes. Your wife still needs you. Your kids still need you. The world still needs you. Do not do this."
And then
I
you take
didn't.
a step back.
Took a half a step back.
Yep.
I was still close enough that if something had been hanging off of one of those cars, it probably would have hit me and it'd have killed me.
Yep.
But I was far enough back that clearly I didn't.
Yep.
And
And thank God you didn't,
thank God I didn't.
you know?
It would have been horrible for everybody. It'd have been horrible for my family. It would have been horrible for that poor engineer. It would have been horrible for whoever had to clean up I mean, it would have been horrible.
Yeah.
And after I stood there for a few minutes shaking and crying, I texted my wife and I said, "I'm coming home. I'm okay." And when I got home, she didn't yell at me. She didn't scream. She just walked up to me and wrapped me up in the biggest hug and said, "I love you and we will get through this together. It's only money."
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was. From that, so what that had me do then was I had to ask myself, okay, so I don't end up doing this again and maybe taking that step. Why can't I hold on to money? What the hell is going on that I know what to do with money, so why don't I do it?
Yeah. Why can't you practice what you preach?
Exactly. And what I came to determine was that I had some stories about money and I had some unresolved emotional, you can call it baggage, you can call it trauma. I use the word trauma, and sometimes when people hear trauma, they think like, some horrific traumatic experience. It doesn't have to be, like abduction or abuse.
Yeah.
Trauma is just when our nervous system hasn't fully dealt with an emotion, and so it stores the emotion in the body. It traumatizes our nervous system. So that's why I use the word trauma, but think of it as
Yeah.
baggage, whatever.
Yeah, and before you go on, right, Kev, I
Yeah,
just wanna tell people,
yeah,
so everybody, like Kevin said, he heard that in his head, "You're worth it. You deserve to be here," right? For anyone that's going through it, right? And especially men, 'cause I do have on Mondays, I have mental health Mondays, so this is a big thing I tell guys, reach out to somebody if you're going through it, talk to somebody, and if you feel like you can't talk to anybody because 'cause you're not comfortable enough talking to your partner or talking to your friend or your best friend, there's an awesome resource. It's 988. It's the suicide and crisis hotline. You can call it, you can text it. It's 24/7. It's always manned and operated. Someone will always text you back. Someone will always answer the phone. Believe me, guys and girls, you're not alone. You're not alone. And this is coming from someone myself, right? I've been in rooms with 500, 600 people where I've felt alone, right? I've been through it. I suffer from anxiety. I suffer from depression, panic attacks as well. So I know what it's like. So for anybody, that's the number you can call. You can always do it because we don't want to see anybody hurt themselves. Everybody deserves to be here. One less person, you know, here on this earth because of what's going on in their mind. We don't need that. We need you to call that number, reach out, or seek some personal help, some professional help.
yeah. And if you don't want to call that number, we'll give you my email address here and my phone number. You can call me. You can call
Perfect.
Jimmy because,
Yeah.
I,
Yep.
I mean, it just, yeah, it doesn't, that doesn't ever have to be the answer.
Exactly. Yeah, because I always say it too. I always say my number's this because I've been through it. You've been through it. We've been there. And you think about the decisions, right, that are going through your head, like you have these, and like you said, it's not voices like, oh, I'm going crazy voices. It's just your self-doubt, your inner person telling you. And you may be running through things like, you said your dad said, oh, you'll never be good with money. And that sometimes can be a tough thing. Like me, I'm single. I got no kids. And sometimes I make great money during the week. And I look at my bank after and I'm like, where the hell did I spend that money? Right. Cause, a lot of us aren't good with money, and I say this all the time and I don't, I'm not saying it to be rude to anybody. Look, you can always get another paycheck next week. If a
That's
bill
it.
doesn't get paid, it's not the end of the world. You know, Still, I say this all the time. If you have a broken arm, right, you go to the doctor and treat it. But if you're feeling something up in your mind, right, people like to think, like you said, Kev, I think when we were younger, we're always told, especially men, don't talk about it. You'll be okay. Shake it off, brush it off. No, men, it's okay not to be okay, but it's also okay to seek help, to get treatment, to talk to somebody because it matters. Your health and your mental health matters.
Absolutely. And you said something earlier, Jimmy, about, we've been taught to stuff it down, stuff it down, stuff it down. The analogy I like to use there is that men, because of what we've been taught, and it's primarily men, but it happens with women too. It's like a volcano. If you look at two volcanoes and one of them is erupting and lava is flowing and there's heat and steam and it looks really scary, and then you look at another volcano that has not erupted, which of those two volcanoes is the more dangerous one?
The one that hasn't erupted.
That's right. Because the one that looks scary has already let the pressure off, and yeah, it's flowing and it's letting it's not going to become as violent
Yeah,
as the one that is still building pressure. And
exactly.
that's what's happening when we stuff down. What we're stuffing down are our emotions. There's a reason we have emotions. Emotions tell our nervous system how to behave and what's going on. It's
Yeah,
information. And when
yeah,
we deny those emotions, when we stuff them down and ignore them or pretend that they're not there, the body still knows. So it's not releasing, stuffing it down is not the same as releasing it. So when
yeah,
we stuff it down, it just builds and builds and builds. And at some point, like that unerupted volcano, it is going to erupt. It is going to be violent and it is going to be destructive and people are going to get hurt.
yeah.
And so
Not just yourself, it's gonna hurt a lot of people.
that's right. And so that's why it's better to just talk to somebody, just, even if you just open a little pressure release valve, man, just it's important. It really
Yeah, it
is
is.
important.
It is, and that's one of the biggest things, and I appreciate you saying that too, Kev, because I think, as men, we just think that's the way it has to be. We have to put on the Superman cape. We have to beat our chests and say we're great, we're okay. Hey, I say it sometimes, right, Kev? Some days I'm down and out, right? A little depression hitting. If I get up and I take a shower, that's a win for me. But I bask in that win, right? I'm okay because I got up, I
Yep.
showered, now I'm off to work. Sometimes just those small little victories, you pat yourself on the back and say, hey, I'm still here, I'm breathing, I'm going, boom. Life's for the living. And it is tough though, because life can be filled with emotions, whether it's, emotionally attached to, like you said, money, emotionally attached to a relationship, a friendship, the loss of a loved one. It can be so much.
Absolutely. And it's just again, why did our parents and grandparents and the people around us, why did they tell us? Why did they share with us that story? Because that's all it was, right? For many of them, it's because that's what was either beat into them or that's how they were treated, right? That was a
Treated,
story
yeah,
that was passed down to them. And it's okay to question, to get back to this whole thing about our belief systems, right? Man, by the time you're 22 years old, 99% of the way you believe the world works is locked in for the rest of your life for the next 60 or so years.
yeah,
I mean, it's okay to ask the question, why do I believe? Who taught me this? Why did they teach me that? And does that belief still serve me? Because if it doesn't, it's okay to change what you believe, right? You're not disrespecting who taught you that. They gave you what they had to give, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
that was just their map of the world. It's so interesting that we're having this conversation because tomorrow so I send out a periodic newsletter, and tomorrow, so I've already written it, it's ready to go. And what it's about is about all this stuff that's going on right now in our country and up in Minnesota,
yeah,
and we've been talking politics, and what I want people to remember is that we're all human beings.
yeah,
Take away the labels, take away the perspectives. So here's the metaphor that I came up with, Jimmy. Your whatever party you are, your political beliefs, that's a map. You have a map of how you see the world from a political perspective. People have a map how they see the world from a religious perspective. People have a map on how they see the world about how relationships work. We have these maps of how we believe the world is. And the reality is two things. Number one, the map is not the ground. So we've lost track of what the ground is. First of all, I'll share with you what I think the ground is in a minute.
yeah.
And we also believe that our map is the map,
Is the map. Yeah,
is the
yeah,
map,
yeah.
right? And the reality is there's 8 billion of us on the planet now, and everybody has a map, and all of their maps are different because they've all had different experiences in life. Sometimes there's overlap,
Yeah,
but there's nothing new for you on your map. You already know everything on your map.
yep,
And the only way to learn something new is to have the courage to look at somebody else's map, to step into their shoes and look through their eyes and see what does their map show. Doesn't mean you have to buy it, but having the willingness to look at it. So we have all these maps, and what we forgot about is the underlying ground, which is we're all human beings and we are all love.
Yeah.
If you boil everything away, what we are is we are energetic love.
Love.
And we have lost that. The Beatles had it right back in the 60s, man. All we need is love.
All we need is love.
And it sounds sappy and it sounds hippy dippy, but I promise you, if people would reconnect to the fact that what we really are is love, and we were to
Yeah.
be more loving and more kind and more empathetic and more understanding that everybody else is just nobody's for the most part, people aren't here to be shitty to you. They're just
No.
having their experience of life just like we are.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's okay. And we need to love people more. We need to be kinder. Look
Yeah.
at
And I think that's
all
great. Like you said, the whole map analogy, right? Nobody's willing, right? Like we were talking politics, but when it comes to life, right? 8 billion people, everyone has a roadmap and
yeah,
nobody wants to look at anybody else's, right? Because
all
they're
they
so
want to
stuck
do
on theirs and stuck
All
on
they
their
wanna
path.
do is fight to be right about what they see, the lens or the perspective that they have. It is if their truth is the truth.
Is the truth. But I think, like you were saying, if you start looking through the lens, right, of we're all human beings, we're all supposed to love one another, right? Not just in the United States of America, the whole world would
No,
be a better place, right?
of
The whole
course,
world would be a better place.
of
I
course.
think we've lost that, just even in this country alone, I'll talk for that love, right? Love your neighbor,
Mhm.
even if they're of, like different different color, different religion, right? Think about growing up when you were a kid, right? If you needed something, you could go next door to your neighbor and grab a cup of milk or grab a cup of sugar, right? When's the
Yep,
last time you've done that to a neighbor nowadays? No, because nobody wants to. Again, everyone's stuck looking at their map, right? They don't
that's
want to
it.
look at your map and say, hey, if you go this way, it's going to be a little different, a little route. Nobody wants to do that. But I think if we open our minds, right? And like you said, it does sound a bit, hippie-ish that hey, all we need is love, right? But it's the goddamn truth.
It
It's so
is.
true.
You
It's
know,
so true.
one of the other things that I talk about in this newsletter is it was so interesting because growing up, I was raised Jewish because my dad was Jewish. My mother
Okay.
was Christian, and when my little sister and I were born, my mom was not attending church. She didn't have a church that she was currently going to. She was raised Catholic, but she wasn't a practicing Catholic. And my dad at least went to the synagogue on the high holidays, and so they said, well, we want the kids to have some religion, so let's raise them Jewish.
Yeah.
But we still celebrated all the Christian holidays too. So we celebrated Hanukkah and Christmas.
And
We got
Christmas.
we got shitty gifts for Hanukkah, and then we got good gifts for Christmas, just because that's the way it was. And we
Yeah.
celebrated Easter and Passover.
Yeah.
And what was interesting about it was that as a kid, while I was being raised to believe one thing, I had questions about, okay, well, why doesn't mom believe the same thing? And why don't mom and dad believe the same thing? And so I had a lot of questions, right? So when I got to college, I was like, all right, why? So if all the religions and Judaism and Christianity and Islam, if they all fundamentally believe in the same God, which they do,
Yeah.
then why are they all killing each other and fighting about who's right? So I started taking some religion classes, like religions of the East and religions of the West and the philosophy of religion and all these different things. And what was fascinating is that when you look at over the thousands of years of all the religions, whether they were East or West, whether they're still a religion or not, and you boil it down, every single one of them in some form or fashion has about three common things: love thy neighbor, love, period, right?
Yep.
There's so much. You look at the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Quran, they all talk about love. Okay?
Yep.
So we're all here for each other. Love thy neighbor, love, and just treat people with human decency.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, but the religion is the map.
Yeah.
The religion says this is how we do it. And and somehow we got fucked up about if you don't do it the way I do it, it's wrong.
It's wrong. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's okay for everybody to just believe whatever they want to believe as long as they're not hurting people.
Exactly. Exactly. I tell people all the time, right after 9/11 with the Quran, and I read it, and there's so many things that are taken out of context where it's such a religion of war and
Yeah.
hurting people. Go read it. I tell them. I say
Read
it's
it.
nothing but a religion of love. You know,
Right.
you can have any go anywhere in the United States where a pastor or a priest can take the Bible and, you know, spin its words into hate, right? Same thing as over in Afghanistan and other places where they take the Quran and they spin it because they're breeding the future terrorists of, their country. Just like here, whether you want to believe it or not, we have Christians that are far right that don't believe in abortion. You can look back. I think it was John can't think of his name, but he blew up abortion clinics. And we have fanatics too. In every religion you go to, you have fanatics, right? But that
Absolutely.
doesn't define the religion itself. And I tell people, go out, read the Quran, read the Bible, read the Torah, read all that stuff because you'll see what the religion really is about.
That's right.
Because it's not what the news and everything. I had on a guy, Wesley Farnsworth, who was a photographer in the military. And he was in the Air Force and he spent time in Afghanistan. And I talked to him about how were the people of Afghanistan, right? And he said, Jimmy, you won't believe this. They're the greatest people in the world, nicest people you'll ever meet. And I go, really? I said, because I spend years watching on TV that they're the worst. And he goes, Jimmy, look, whenever I went into a village, I was always offered food. I was always offered tea. The kids would always come up in amazement because we were Americans, but they would come up and they would show love. And I said, wow, Wesley, because for years I was told on the news by our media that, hey, the Afghanis are bad people. He goes, Jimmy, I never saw that. But it's like anywhere else, you go to the south side of Chicago, you have small groups, gangs, and all that. In Dorchester, here, you go to North Dorchester, you have small gangs. There's bad people wherever you go. It doesn't define the region, doesn't define the religion, And I think, like you said, it is hippie to say, but that's all we need is love.
Yeah. And yeah. And it's, unfortunately, my experience, I'm 56 years old, about to be 57. And with the people that I've worked with, and as I look around and talk to people, people don't have conversations like you and I are having today, but they used to
Wow.
have them all the time.
Yeah.
And I think, and I kind of blame this on television, actually. People are pretty shallow. Most
Yeah.
people are pretty shallow in their thinking, and it's easier to just do what you were talking about earlier, just going through the motions, wash, rinse, and repeat. Get up, go
Yeah.
to work, make the money, come home, eat dinner, watch Netflix, go to bed, get up, do it again tomorrow.
Yep.
Sitting on the sidelines of life, just going through the motions, waiting to die. And it doesn't make them bad people. I'm not saying they're dumb or they're stupid or that there's nothing wrong with that. And we have been taught to think, and this is the reason I blame it on television. We have been taught to think in small bite-sized pieces in 7-minute segments in
Little
between
clips. Yeah.
commercials.
Yeah.
And so our ability to think long term has been affected by that. Our ability to really connect with people and just have conversation and be okay with the fact that, you know what, you and I may not believe the same thing, and that's actually a good thing.
Good thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
because if you believe something different than I do, you might actually teach me something.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm open to consider that I don't have all the answers, because that's another thing we've been led to believe is that
Yep.
we're all perfect and we all have to
And
have
I
all
think you
the
just
answers.
said it. You have to be open though.
You have to
Open.
have the willingness to be open,
Exactly.
curious.
Yep. Because I say it, Kevin, right? When it comes to politics, right? Because that's what I do with my local, and I tell people if when it comes to politics for me, I can listen to the MAGA, I can listen to the right, the left, I can listen to it all, right? Because how I look at politics is I don't have all the answers, but if you can change my mind and my thinking, hey, you know what? Boom, that's good because I'm willing and able to receive it and listen to it and think about it, right? But now you have that even in common everyday life, right? Everyone wants to argue with everything because everyone thinks they're right. Everyone thinks that, again, my map is the right way to go.
Yeah.
And it's a simple way if you look at it, right? And say, if we just had more love, people were more open and people were more understanding, it'd be a better world, right? It sounds so simple, right? But it is.
It is. And a question that I have learned to ask myself when I find myself getting worked up and wanting to be right and wanting to defend my truth, when I catch myself, I step back and I ask this question, and it helps me every time. I ask the question, what would love do right now? And when I stop and ask that question and look at it through the lens of how would love deal with this, immediately my guard comes down. I open up. I'm willing to listen. I don't need to defend. There's plenty of time. And again, I don't have to accept what you're telling me. But
Yeah.
if I'm willing to consider the fact that that none of us knows everything, we can't.
It's
It's
impossible.
impossible,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I want to get back to, and this has been awesome, and I know we're right up against the hour. I don't know how much longer you
We
want to
can go
go.
as long as, we can go. So Kev, I just got one, some more questions. So what was your career and external life like during the years you were carrying all that weight that was going unnoticed?
So again, it was mostly in the world of financial services, and it was, that's where a lot of that guilt and shame came from because I'm showing people what to do. I'm teaching them what to do, knowing that I'm doing something different, but not I wasn't telling them to do something that was good for me and not good for them. No, I
Yeah.
was telling them what to do, how to really make it, but yet my behavior was incongruent with that. That was hard
Yeah.
because my values are to be honest and to have integrity, and it was really tough. And so that's part of where that buildup, right? And not having and not really willing to talk, not willing to be vulnerable and talk to
Yeah.
somebody about, here's what's going on,
Yeah.
stuffing that stuff down.
Stuffing it down.
That's really what started to build that pressure that ended up with me standing next to the damn railroad
Next to the
track.
train. Yeah. Not, that segues into the next question, right? But I'll say it to you, right? And I say it to people all the time with me, right? I have anxiety, right? And I explain it to people that every morning I wake up, it's like I have 12 bricks on my chest, right? And throughout the day, some days I get all 12 bricks off, right? And I feel amazing. Some days I get 6, some days I get 4, some days I get none. But the very next morning when I wake up, all 12 bricks are back, right? So segue back to, about 6 months ago, 7 months ago, I went through some things in life and I had to take stock and I had to look myself in the mirror, right? Still, I had to come truthful to myself, my role in what had happened and transpired, and it wasn't just, it was all her fault. My fault too. Two people that were in a relationship that didn't work, but no fault of one party or the other. Both of us were to blame, right? So I look in the mirror and I take stock and I forgive myself. I forgive her and others. And for the next couple weeks, it was like I was waking up some days with no bricks on my chest. I was waking up with 2 bricks on my chest. I was waking up, but those 12 bricks never came back. Recently, I got a therapist appointment tomorrow. I've been following up on that, which I always do anyways. But, I tell people all the time, if you can confront it, and you can talk to yourself, others, but you got to confront it and you got to be honest with yourself first. And once you become honest with yourself, it's almost like the weight of the world comes off the shoulders and you can stop feeling like yourself again, right?
It's you I don't know whether you know this or not, but you just gave the answer. You just gave the answer, or certainly one of the answers of how to release emotional trauma.
Trauma. Yeah. Forgiveness. Yeah. Yeah.
Because so
I've
you
done a
the
lot of
way
work, Kevin, the
I
last
know,
7 months.
I'm clear, man, and that's awesome, and I love that because here's and think about it. Think about what you just said. You said, "I forgave myself and I forgave her." And it felt like the bricks were gone. Well, the bricks, that feeling in your body, that's your nervous system.
Yeah.
Those that anxiety and that pressure, that's the nervous system saying, I haven't dealt with and I don't know how to release this energy that's being created by the thoughts I'm having, because thoughts create things,
Yeah.
right? The thoughts that we're having create an emotional response in our body, and the body doesn't know how to release it. So as you're going through the day and you're letting bricks
Yeah.
go, but you're not really discharging it, and
Nope.
then the next day it comes right back. That's why when I said earlier, if you don't learn at some point how to release this unresolved emotional trauma, your future is very predictable. Tomorrow you're going to wake up with those same 12 fucking bricks on your chest.
Exactly. Yeah. I did that for almost 41 years.
Yeah, I did it. So dude, I'm gonna tell you the story. So why was I so bad with money? I was let's see, in 29, I was 50 years old. I was born in 1969. I had just
Yep.
turned 50. when I started to look back and go, okay, so what the hell is going on? Why can't I hold on to money? And I started doing some work and I started thinking back to what was my first memory of money. Like I said earlier, we were upper middle class. We never worried about money. You
Yeah,
know, we had nice vacations and we lived in a decent house in a nice neighborhood, right? We weren't suffering at all.
at all. Yeah.
We weren't rich, but we were far from poor.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about, all right, well, what's my first real memory of money? And the first thing that came to my mind was I was about 10 or 11 years old. So this would have been around 1981. So I guess I was 11 or 12, 1980, 1981. And we were clothes shopping, clothes shopping for school, upcoming
Yep.
school year. And I told my mom, I said, look, there's only two things that I want this year. I want an Izod polo shirt, you know, the little alligator,
Yep.
and I want a pair of Nikes. Nikes had come out like 2 years earlier, and I was like, "I want a pair of Nikes." And here's what my mom said to me. She said, "Well, because we are self-employed and because your dad has health issues and we don't have any health insurance, we don't buy name brand things because we buy the generic things, and I save the difference in what the brand would cost, and I put that money away so that we'll have money so that in the future when your dad's health gets worse, we'll have money to take care of your dad." That's what she said. And then here was the next part. She said, "So Kmart clothes and Payless shoes is what we'll be buying for you." That's what she said. She didn't. Now, what my little 10-year-old brain heard, remember, your comfort, or sorry, your belief system is put in place by the people that you see as authorities.
Authority.
And
Yeah.
what my little undeveloped brain heard was, you're not as good as those other kids and you're not worthy of having nice things.
Yeah.
I was 10 or 11 years old.
Yeah. So when you started getting money, you just started, hey,
I'll show
I'm
you.
going to take care of that little boy.
Now that wasn't logically what I was doing, right? My
Yeah.
logical brain
But
didn't go,
subconsciously you were.
but that traumatized me
Yeah.
because I was bullied for wearing Kmart clothes. I didn't have the alligator on my shirt. I had the fucking hippopotamus from Kmart, right? And kids made fun of me for that. And it created trauma that I carried with me for 40 years.
Yep.
Something that happened when I was 10 or 11 years old had me standing next to a fucking train.
Train. Yeah. Yeah.
My
Yeah.
mom
Pushing
my
you.
mom would have never, if she knew, she would have never said that, but
Yeah.
that wasn't the point. But what was the point was my body held on to that. My unconscious mind held on to that story, that belief that you're not worthy, you're not as good as other people. And so from a money standpoint, every time it came in, well, if I'm not good enough to have money, let's get rid of it.
Let's get rid of it. Yeah. As
Let's get
quick as
rid
you
of it.
can. Yeah. Yeah.
And so then I understood. So awareness. So you got to become aware of what the story is and what's causing the behavior. So as it relates, and this is not just about money, it's about relationships. It's about our own personal health. It's about our growth. It's about, our relationships with our kids. It's about our profession. We all have these kinds of stories and this trauma in those areas of life that if you can start to see a pattern developing in an area of life, I promise you there is an unresolved trauma in your nervous system that's causing that thing to happen over and over and over again. And you can know logically, I shouldn't be doing this. But until you understand how to release it from your body and really let it calm and let your system, because the unconscious brain, its only real job is to keep you safe.
Yeah.
And so what it's running, the patterns and the software that's running in your brain, it thinks it's doing the best to keep you safe based on
To keep you
how it was
safe.
programmed.
Yeah. And once you start changing those patterns, though, that's when,
But here's the thing. In order to change the pattern, you got to get rid of the old one first. You can't just
first.
overwrite what's already there, because at some point the old stuff is going to come through. You have to learn how to let it go.
Yeah.
And that's what forgiveness is about.
No, that's the biggest thing.
People really learn. Look, forgiveness is not about saying whatever happened, A, didn't happen, or B,
Yeah.
that it was okay. It's not about saying what you did was okay. No, you
Yeah.
still need to remember what happened. You need to preserve the learnings of what happened, but the trauma, the energy in your body that's still. So you talk about depression and anxiety. And look, I'm not a doctor. I haven't even slept at a Holiday Inn Express recently, but I'm gonna tell you what I know. And I'm not saying that there's not physiological reasons that people have depression and anxiety. They do. And most depression and anxiety is self-caused. So depression is a result of thinking about things that happened in the past, thinking about them now in the present, and recreating the energy of what happened as if it's still happening right now. That will cause you to be depressed. But
Yeah.
it's about thinking about the past and bringing it into the present as if it's happening. Anxiety is thinking about things that might happen in the future that haven't really happened, but
Or
bringing it
may
into
not
the
even.
present as if it's happening right now, and that creates anxiety.
Yeah.
So one of the ways to help minimize and mitigate both anxiety and depression is to learn to stay present.
Stay present. Yeah.
Just stay in this moment. What's going on right now? What is real right now?
Yeah.
Right?
And that's one of the craziest things that you say that, right, Kev, is because that's one of my biggest things in the last 3 months that I've started doing, being in the present, not worrying about yesterday, not focusing on tomorrow, being in the present, right? And also being in the present as in, if I'm out in an event or somewhere, out at dinner, put my phone away. I stop scrolling,
Yep.
stop going through social media, stop
Be
going through emails from work. Be
right.
present, be in the moment,
Be
live it,
here.
love it.
Be here now. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's so many things that it's so fascinating to me, religions. So while I'm not a religious person. I told you I was raised Jewish. If I had to put a label on myself right now, I would say I practice some forms of Buddhism, not as a religion, but as a practice,
As a practice,
like
spirituality, basically.
like yoga, right? So
Yeah.
you could be Jewish and do yoga. Yoga's a practice. You could
Yeah.
be Jewish and a Buddhist. You could be Catholic and be a Buddhist, because Buddhism is really just about certain behaviors, certain practices. It's not
Yeah.
about
Certain practices,
worship.
pattern
It's not
behaviors.
about worshiping a deity. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but what's interesting is there are universal laws that apply to everyone. Some religions have taken these universal laws and they've given it a label and they've brought it into their ideology, right? But
Yeah.
it's really a universal law. And most of them are about things that we've been talking about, right? Like, be present.
Yeah.
What you give is going to come back. Some
Come
people
back.
call that karma.
Yep.
The universe, it's called the law of reciprocity. When you give something, it always comes back. It may not look like what you gave, but so there's these universal laws that the more we start talking about this stuff and having a willingness to be open and to start to just observe what's happening around us, you start to see the same patterns. Yes, they may have different labels, but we're all saying the same thing,
Yeah.
right? For the most part. And so that's the beauty. And some of us, some of us, it takes longer than others to figure it out or to see the patterns, or to get to that place where we're willing to have that openness,
Openness. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Once I started being open and, being able to be open is when things started changing, and also not even just changing like everyday life changing, but also how I think, how I retain information. It's almost, a lot of different things change and for the better,
Yeah. Well,
you know?
and so what that is, that's that in the world of neuroscience, that's called neuroplasticity. It's rewiring your brain. They have proven scientifically that we can create new neural connections in our brain,
New pathways. Yeah.
new neural pathways, and
Yeah.
it is literally rewiring the brain. So, to put it into computer terms, we've all got programming. A
Yeah.
lot of us are running old DOS 3.0 programs from 30 years ago, and we're in a Windows 11 or we're in a Macintosh world, and some people just they need to have their software updated. And if you just attempt to overwrite, put new software on top of old, it's going to get glitchy and it's going to get buggy. It's better to
It's gonna
wipe
fry
it
the system.
clean
Exactly.
and install the new software. And that's how you create lasting change in your life in whatever area we're talking about. There's, one of the things that I teach my clients is there's only 4 rules to change, to create lasting change in your life. If you want something to change in your life, there's only 4 things you have to do. It's a very simple formula. The problem is most people skip the first step. And if you skip the first step and do the other 3, it's highly probable that you will not keep it long term. So what are the 4 steps? The first one is you have to learn to identify and release emotional trauma in your body.
Yeah.
Clear the page. You got to get rid of it. You got to take out the old software. You got to turn the page. You got to start with a blank sheet, because if you don't, that old stuff is going to percolate through. That's the first step. Most people have never heard of that, or they think it's too hippy dippy and they're like, yeah, I'm going to brute force my way through it. And
Yeah.
then they do steps 2 and 4, and they also don't do step 3 because they think that's bullshit too. And I'll tell you what that is. So step 2, so once you've cleared the page, now it's about setting goals, setting outcomes, saying, okay, I've got a blank page here. What is it that I want different in my life? And lay it out. Here's what I want. This is what I want my picture of my life to look like now moving forward. So when people 3 weeks ago started setting their New Year's resolutions, right? I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to work out, I'm going to do all this stuff. Well, they set that intention, but unfortunately, they got some old stories about being healthy or working out or whatever that they didn't clear. And now it's easier to stay home. When it's cold out, it's easier to stay home than it is to go to the gym,
You-
because they didn't get rid of all the old shit. So clear the shit, set your outcomes. Step 3 is what's called future pacing. In the world of NLP, are you familiar with NLP, neuro linguistic programming? Okay, so NLP, you know who Tony Robbins is? Yeah, so everything Tony Robbins does is based off of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming.
Okay.
Neuro-linguistic programming is a way to basically reprogram the unconscious mind, is one of the things it does. But in NLP, this technique is called future pacing. Future pacing is imagining yourself in the future as if you have already achieved whatever the outcomes that you set were. So when you hear sports teams sometimes saying that on the first day of training camp, one of the first things they do is they imagine themselves winning the championship, 6 months later. And they put themselves out there and hear the champagne and they see the streamers coming down and they hear the people cheering and, the smiles on their face and all that. Why do they do that? Because when you future pace something, when you put yourself out in the future and create the energy as if what you want to happen has already happened,
Yep.
it actually pulls you to that. So if you've ever heard of the book or the movie The Secret or the law of attraction, that's what that's all about. So clear the page. Step 2, set your outcomes. Step 3, future pace it. Imagine yourself already out there and create the excitement and literally celebrate as if you have already done it. That's step 3. And then step 4, you got to do the work. You got to take a step.
Yep. You
But
got to do the work.
when you've already figured it out, you just take a step. And then you stop, you look around. Are there any circumstances? Are there any new resources available? Yeah, now this is available. Great. So now take that next step and take the next step. And eventually you get there, but it lasts because you're not writing over old stuff.
Old stuff. Yeah. And a lot of people think, right, when healing, you talk about healing from emotional patterns, healing from trauma, all that stuff, even changing your patterns, right? People think that it's just going to happen. It's going to happen by itself. It's going to take 24 hours. It's going to happen. Right. But the biggest thing I've learned for me is action, right? You have to put those words, those mantras into action. And if you don't do the work,
Yeah.
then nothing's going to happen.
Law of
I don't care what
attraction
you say.
Law of attraction doesn't say see yourself, with $1 million in the bank and on the
It's
smile, and
just
then
going to happen.
you get to sit on the couch and watch Netflix until the check shows up.
Exactly.
Not how
Exactly.
it
And I
works.
tell people that, you got to put in the work, and me, I've been a work in progress. The hardest that I've been working on myself over the last 7 months is since I've been born, of, reading books and, I got a book here, The Pathway of Surrender, Letting Go, certain things that you read, certain things you learn from. And it's just about, like you said, but also you got to get out of the old way of you were doing things, the old patterns, get them out,
Yep.
put the new ones in. But also with all that, like you said, it starts with a step. If you
That's
don't
it.
take that step, it's not gonna do itself. So, Kevin, a lot of people, right, feel pressure to be the strong one. How did that role trap you? And what happens when someone finally drops that mask?
So that's an interesting question because I nobody told me I had to be the strong one. I told me I had to be the strong
You
one.
told yourself, yeah.
Yeah, and again, that's some of that pre-programming from when I was a little kid, right? Men, the man is the leader of the family, and the man has to be the one that brings home the money, and the man has to do, right? And so nobody ever said that to me out loud, I don't think, but I just, I brought that on. And
But I think as men, we always bring that. That's one of the biggest things we do.
it is, and it's societal, right? It's part of how society has led us to believe, and I don't know that it's universal. Probably is, certainly in America, and certainly, some ethnic communities, right? I know in like the Hispanic community, it's very much a social thing, like, the man, it's a very much a man dominated ethnicity.
Yeah,
And so that's just like, I mean, you don't even question it, right? It's just that's just how it is.
it is. Yeah,
But it's just a map. And so I think the way I want to answer that one, Jimmy, is it starts with the willingness to be vulnerable. Vulnerability, again, here's another thing we've been taught as men, that vulnerability is weakness. Never
yeah.
let them see you sweat. Never let them,
See you
never
cry.
let them see you cry. Never, and that has damaged us as men, because here's the thing. It takes a hell of a lot more courage to let your guard down and be vulnerable than it does to keep a wall up.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know anybody that would say being more courageous isn't a positive thing, right?
Exactly.
So it was when I learned the power of vulnerability and again made the choice to let my guard down and not have to be and to take that mask off
Yeah,
and say, "I can't do this alone. I need
yeah.
help. I
I need help.
need
Yeah,
I need help." Asking for help, being vulnerable. Again,
and
those are
asking for
all
help isn't a weakness.
it is not a weakness.
Nope.
Everybody has different skills, and we can't do it together, and how boring is it doing it by ourselves?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's
Yep.
very lonely to do
No
everything
doubt about it.
yourself.
Yeah.
And
So
so yeah, so I my answer there is, it was when I made the choice, and you've used that word several times, and that's
yeah,
another thing that, all this stuff is just a choice.
a choice. Yeah.
You gotta make the choice. So it's funny when my, so I'm with my 3rd, wife. I don't call her my practice wife. She's the last one. I had 2 practice ones, and this is so it's either 3rd strike, you're out, or 3rd time's a charm. I'm
Third
going
time's a charm.
3rd time's a charm. But when we first reconnected, because we went to high school together, but when we first reconnected a while, a number of years ago, and I was telling her about some of the personal growth work that I was doing, and she would ask me, she's like, "Well, so how did you, do that?" And I said, "Well, I chose it."
Yeah.
And she'd be like, she'd kind of look at me like, "Okay." And then she'd say, "Well, how do I do this?" And I say, "Well, it's very simple. You just need to choose it."
Yeah. Exactly.
And after I told her that about 10 times, she said something to me, and I started to speak, and she said, "And if you tell me one more time to choose it, I'm gonna kick you in the nuts." Right? I'm like, "Well, then I got nothing to say to you,
Yep.
because the answer is you choose it, right?"
Exactly. Personal growth. It starts with a choice.
A choice, and accepting that personal responsibility that
Yep.
nobody's gonna do it for me.
Nobody. And the work
Nobody.
you have to do.
It's work that I get to do. I don't have to do it. I get to do it,
You get to do it. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so all this stuff is really cool, but that one, I think the answer there is vulnerability. And, you
Vulnerability.
mentioned masks. There's a great book out there. I don't know if you've ever read it or not. It's really good for men. It's by Lewis Howes, and it's called The Mask of Masculinity.
Okay. I'll
And,
have to check
so
that out.
Lewis Howes, Olympic. He was an Olympic athlete, and, he's got a big podcast, and anyway, he's a influencer, but his book, The Mask of Masculinity, was really, really a good resource for me, talking about the masks that we wear. Talks about a lot of the
That
stuff
will
we're
be.
talking about here.
Yeah.
So that's a book. So when as you're going through your book list and things that you're looking to
Yeah.
read, that's a pretty
Be
good one.
definitely one I'm gonna have to add on to the list.
Yeah.
So a couple more questions, Kev. So burnout, right? It's another big one that you focus on. What's the connection you've found between unprocessed emotions and hitting that wall of exhaustion?
Well, that's the body, we can only submit the body to so much before it shuts down.
It breaks down.
And some of that's those excess emotions that we've been stuffing down. the willingness. So burnout comes when we refuse. Part of it comes from when we refuse to listen to our bodies. That's another thing that, in the West versus the East, people in the East, um, China, India, the Middle East, their cultures taught them to pay attention to what was going on with their bodies,
Yeah.
and mostly in the West, we've been taught to be a lot more logical than kinesthetic. So kinesthetic being feelings and
Feeling.
touch. And so, when people say, well, my I got this gut feeling, right? You should trust your gut. And
Yeah.
we've not been taught how to tune in to that gut feeling. They've actually in the last couple of years, Jimmy, they've actually come out and proven that our guts have a neurological system just like the brain.
Okay. Yeah.
And so sometimes when I'm working with clients and they ask me, well, I'm having a hard time figuring out what should I do here. I tell them to check in with all three of their brains. Now, men, one of your brains is not at the end of your penis, but our three brains, we all have three brains. We have a brain in our head, which I just talked about. We have a brain in our gut, and we actually have a brain in our heart.
Okay.
And so when someone says, I don't know what to do, I say, well, check in with all three brains and go with the majority. So what does your head brain tell you should do? What's the logic? Logically, I think I should go this way. Okay.
Yeah.
What's your gut tell you? So if you start listening, it's like, well, gut's telling me I should go that way. Okay. What's your heart
Hard
tell you?
telling that. Yeah.
And I've never failed to make a good decision when I've gone through that process. But in order to do it, we have to learn to get out of our head and into our heart and into our
Into our
gut.
heart. Yeah. You gotta be in tune with it.
And so you do. And so burnout typically comes from the brain. Burnout is a mental thing. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do wash, rinse, and repeat anymore. I'm burned out. I don't want to do this anymore. Well, your body's probably been telling you that for a long time, that there's an incongruence or that there's something that needs to be happening here and you've ignored it because you've never been taught how to tune into it. And so for me, again, that was understanding that I can't logic my way out of everything. It was the same with my money issues. Logically, I knew logically what I was supposed to do. The problem was it wasn't logic. It was a gut, or it was a nervous system thing, right? And the body, so you probably heard you may have learned in your personal growth journey yourself, is that the body remembers.
Yeah.
It stores that energy, and until it knows how to release it, it's going to hold on to it. And so you said earlier, people think, oh well, over time this will just go away. No, it will not.
Yeah.
It's going to stay in the body until you physically learn how to release it.
Release it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that burnout really is a function of the brain finally catching up with what the body has probably been telling you for a while, like, this is not the answer. And
Yeah.
then you're like, okay, well, I don't want to do this anymore. So what do I do? And now you get to that place where you're willing to consider, because before you get there, most people, what they do is they do everything they can to logic their way out of it. Well, maybe I just do this instead, right? They have this thought. Well, maybe I just need to work harder, or maybe I just need to, and it's all logic and it's all strategy based. And eventually they get to a place where they've applied all the strategies that they've heard of or that they can think of. And now they're at a place where they're just like, I don't know what else to do. I, I,
To
I don't know
do.
what to do, but I know what I don't want to do anymore. And it's this.
Yeah.
And that's when they're now open to the question of, okay, so what else is possible? And that's where it requires them to ask for help, because
Yeah.
clearly they don't know what to do. Because if they did know what to do, they would do it.
Exactly. But I think burnout too, the term burnout, right? It's starting to make its way to the West. It's always been a big thing in the East, especially over in the UK, over that way. Burnout's a big thing, right? People go out of work. Hey, I got burnout. All right, you signed out of work for a month or two. Imagine going here in the States, right? And saying, hey, I'm burnt out. The boss would tell you, Go shit in a hat, get back to work.
That's
You know
right.
what I mean?
Yeah,
Because, but I think burnout now, the term itself is starting to make its way here because it's real. It's real. Believe me. I have many people that I work with, that I work alongside with, that are burnt out, and they just keep pushing themselves and pushing themselves and pushing themselves. And it's one of those where it's just going to blow.
it is.
So
And
Kevin,
you can push your body so far, and at some point it's going to shut down on you.
it's going to shut down again.
It's gonna shut down because we're not machines. We're
We're
not
not
built for
built
that.
that way.
We're not built for that. We're built for balance, right? In all things, there really does need to be balance. It's you know, you talked about the importance of mental health. You know, we still have a long way to go about learning how to deal with mental health. Over in Europe, they're ahead of us, right? They
Yeah,
there's a reason that they give them 2 months of vacation from day one instead of 2 weeks,
exactly. 2 weeks,
right?
exactly.
Because and people actually go take their vacation. They actually go on
Yeah,
vacation,
yeah,
and because the mental health, man, we we're not designed to just go 100 hours in a week and just do that every week for forever and ever until, you know, we retire. It's not designed that way. We have to have some balance. And again, most of the stuff is learned behavior. It's observed and learned behavior, and we've never gotten the okay. It's never been okay to do it differently because of what we fear the consequences are, right?
yeah. And I think in the West, that's some of the hottest problems for us is we're so stuck on money, so stuck on status, so stuck on, what kind of car I drive, kind of house I have.
Yeah.
It's tough. But so I know you emphasize, right, telling the truth and stopping the pretending. What's the scariest truth you had to face about yourself?
So the scariest truth, honestly, was that I didn't know it all, and that I didn't need help. I was, you know, I've always been one of the smartest people that I know, and I'm not, and I don't mean that to come across as I know that I have an intelligence, and
Yep.
I know that there are certain things where I have excelled because of my ability to learn and apply. Okay. Unfortunately, I took that and I just assumed that that applied in everything, and that, you know, at some point I don't know that if I was ever egotistical enough, if you would ask me, you know, is there any room that you don't feel like the smartest guy? I don't think I'm egotistical enough to go, yeah, I've never been in a room where there's anybody smarter than me. I know that there's people smarter than me,
Yeah.
but I also know that I've been very successful in life, generally figuring stuff out myself. And when I found myself standing next to those train tracks, clearly I was not the smartest. Something was broken
Yeah.
that I wasn't smart enough to fix, and I had to acknowledge I can learn from other people. I need help. This is not this is not going to get better on its own. And I think that my answer to that.
Yeah. So I got two more questions. So you've rebuilt your life for good. How has that changed how you show up in the world now compared to the old version of Kevin?
Yeah. So 6 years ago, 7 years ago, but before the, you know, before the night that changed my life,
Change everything. Yeah.
I wouldn't have been anywhere. I wouldn't have told a story. Whatever was my train track moment prior to that, I would have never admitted it out loud to anybody.
To anybody. Yeah. Yeah. You would have just kept
But
it
I'd
down.
have buried that because then what are they going to think of me?
Yeah.
When I first started my personal growth journey, one of the exercises that we went through was identifying what is the biggest story or fear that had been holding me back from getting to my next level or whatever. And what I came up with was I wanted to be liked. I had a fear of um not embarrassment, but I wanted to be liked. And so I would do things that maybe weren't the best for me, but if it made you like me, then I was good with that.
You will go with it. Yeah.
And so I had to have this veneer or this appearance that everything, you know, everything's good, man.
Everything's good. Yeah.
You know, we got a nice house, we got nice cars, we go on nice vacations. Don't look at my bank account and don't look at my credit card statements, man. But on the outside, man, that guy's got everything going on.
Everything.
And it was
Yeah.
bullshit.
And I think
Well,
most guys do that,
a lot of people do.
you
And
know?
because again, in our society, we've been taught that what you see on the outside is real. And for
Yeah.
most people, it's not real at all.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I say to people, right, Kevin, that, sometimes on my social media, they'll say, oh, well, you seemed like you were a bit off today. And I go, look, I show you what my life is really like and how I'm really feeling. I don't use social media to show you the best moments of the day or
Yeah.
the worst moment. I said, I show you everything,
Yeah.
good, bad, or indifferent, and I do struggle. I may struggle and I may let you know, hey, I'm struggling, but I'm still here. I'm still fighting. I'm still going because
Yeah.
I think that's one of the hottest things. I think over here in the West, right? We're taught whoever has the most money in the bank is the best. Whoever has the biggest house is the best. Whoever drives the fancy, expensive cars is the best. Whoever has the grandest vacations is the best, you know?
Yeah.
But for me, I consider myself the best, right? The best at my job, the best, person I can be, right? As long as, when I come home, I have a roof over my head, I got a little bit of food on the table, and I got something to drink, a warm place to live, and love in my heart,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and here's the real thing, that it took me a while to really understand that life is not a competition.
No,
Well, let me rephrase that. Life is a competition, but it's not the competition you think it is. It's
right?
not about me versus you. The only competition I should be concerned about is me versus me.
Me,
And am
exactly.
I better today than I was yesterday? Because if I'm using you as my benchmark, right? Even if I'm ahead of you in whatever it is that I'm competing with you, if I'm constantly looking back at where are you and measuring where I am compared to where you are, I'm missing out. You know what? I don't need to compete with you. I don't need to compete
Nope,
with anybody. Whereas
nope,
that is when we do competitions of one versus another, that's a scarcity. That's coming from a place of scarcity, as if there's not enough for everyone.
exactly.
And
Yep,
there is no scarcity in the universe. There is abundance.
abundance, yeah.
The only place that scarcity exists is in the stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah,
So the only person I ever compete with is me. And I promise you, I'm gonna cheer you on and I'm gonna cheer everybody else on. And if you beat my ass, if you're so far ahead of me, I am so happy for you
exactly. Yeah,
because your path has nothing to do with mine.
nope. And that's when I started going on my journey. I started learning that, right? I started learning that I don't care what people say. I don't care, at the end of the day, what the guy next door to me has or the guy that I work with has. Like you said, I'm in competition with myself. And I'm
Yeah.
in competition to be a better man today than I was yesterday.
Yep.
But I'm also in competition with myself to be present in the moment
Yep.
every day, you
Yep.
know?
And that'll
And I
and
can be vulnerable, I cry, I get upset, but I'm learning my emotions, and I'm learning to, like you said, be the best man you can be today and be a little bit better than you were yesterday. But also coming from love with love in the heart,
That's
you
it.
know?
And Jimmy, the reason that people will love you and appreciate you is because you're not pretending to be
Yeah.
something that you're not. We live in such a plastic world, where there's so much fake bullshit,
Yep.
right? Forget about it even being AI. I mean, just the perception, people taking pictures of themselves standing in front of a private jet like it's theirs and all that shit. You know what? What's missing is people being real. And so again, that's part of what's different in how I hold myself out now. You know,
Yep.
I I am who I am. And if you like
Exactly.
me, great. And if you don't
Yeah,
like me,
exactly.
great.
It's still not gonna make a difference to my life,
Right.
you
It's
know?
funny, you said you don't care. So, have you seen you're a little bit younger than I am, but do you remember about 10 years ago or so, the honey badger videos?
Yeah, yeah.
The crazy, nasty ass honey badger don't care. Honey badger don't
Honey
give a
Bat,
shit.
yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, when I that was popular about the time that I started my journey.
Okay.
And this whole thing about wanting to be liked, I cared more about what you thought of me than I cared about what I thought of.
Of myself, yeah.
And so I saw that honey badger video and I went, "You know what? I need to be a honey badger. I need to not give a shit and
Yep.
I just need to be me." And so I literally for about 2 years I took on the honey badger persona on Facebook. I was Kevin Honey Badger Fink. for Halloween one year. I dressed up as a honey badger, and but it was my way of reminding myself that I matter to me, and I can't live for what you think of me.
No.
If you're cheering me on, I'm grateful and I'm appreciative. And if you want to curse me and say I'm the worst piece of garbage, you know what? You're entitled to your opinion. It doesn't mean it's true,
Yeah.
but
Go ahead.
I'm not gonna change who I am because you don't like what I'm doing.
Exactly.
Because
Yep.
I'm out here spreading love and kindness and helping people be better versions of themselves and teaching them how to let shit go. And I haven't said this to you tonight, but I'd say I'm 56 years old and I set myself a big, hairy, audacious goal, a BHAG, that in the next 15 years, so by the time I'm 71, I want to have touched and helped transform a million lives.
A million lives.
A million lives.
Oof.
And to do that, I can't keep playing small. I can't keep doing it onesie twosie. I got to do it in a way where and it's the challenge with an audacious goal like that is, how do I measure it? Well, I'm not gonna ever know. If you ask me, "Where are you at, man?" "Well, I'm at 700,346. I got 240,000 to get." No, but I'm gonna know that if I have an interaction with you, I'm gonna do everything I can to give you to pump you up and to give you what I have to give, and hope that you take a piece of it and you share it with the people in your life. And so that's how I show up different today, is that I don't really care if you like me or not. I want you to, but it doesn't affect me the same way. And I'm gonna be, and even if you want to be shitty, I'm still gonna love you and I'm gonna forgive you, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
cheer you on, even if you're not my biggest fan.
Exactly. And that's the biggest thing, love, to love, to spread love costs nothing.
Yeah, it's free.
It's
Sprinkle it
free,
everywhere.
you know? So last question, Kev, if you could go back, right, and speak, I know you've probably gotten this question a million times, and speak to the man standing on those tracks, what would you tell him? And what do you hope listeners take away from hearing your story today?
I would tell him, don't let it get to that point.
Yeah.
It never has to get to that point where you think that that's the only solution or that that's the best solution. There are so many moments before that, that if I had just if I'd had a different thought, if I had taken a different action, if I had been willing to ask for help, I never would have been in that position in the
In
first
that
place.
position.
And that's what I hope people take away, is that it never has to get to that.
Yeah.
It does require that you that you make some hard choices, right? Or that choices that feel hard in the moment, that when you look back on them, you go, "Well, fuck, that wasn't very hard. I don't know why I made that so hard," right? Like
Yeah.
asking for help,
Yep.
or saying, "I don't have the answer to this and I want you to help me,"
Help
right?
me.
That's the biggest thing. It never has to get to that point.
Yeah. And it
And
makes you no less of a man if you have to ask for help.
it doesn't. It doesn't. And again, people today, we are we are craving podcasts like this. We are craving real stories of real people
Oh yeah.
who are telling the truth, who are not, we could have sat here for the last hour and 45 minutes and just bullshitted and made stuff
Yeah.
up and laughed and,
Yeah.
whatever. But
Sugarcoated it and pretended everybody, hey, you know what? You're going to heal in 24 hours. You're good to go. Yeah. No, we tell people how it is.
it is.
Oh, that's what I love about it.
Yeah, and so I'm so grateful that I saw your post and on in the group on Facebook, and that I
Yeah.
reached out, and that you're doing this, because it really does matter. And yeah, so if anybody's listening, you're not alone. Nothing is wrong with you. Nothing's broken. Nothing needs to be fixed. You are whole. You are complete. And there are people cheering for you and willing to help and want you to succeed. And if you haven't done what you are here to do yet, it is not time for you to go.
Exactly. And remember one thing, you are loved too.
And you are loved. And that's the thing, man. So many people, that's really, when I work with them, and we strip away all of the words and the things that they think it is, and we really get down to the root of it all. people want to be loved,
Loved. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
It
Yeah. So, Kev, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, man.
You know,
This has been fun.
so thank you for showing up today with zero filters, for laying it all out, for reminding us that the heaviest burdens are the ones we carry in silence, and that facing them isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing any of us can do. Your journey isn't just inspiring, it's a lifeline. For anyone out there pretending they're fine while everything inside is screaming, you've turned your pain into purpose. Because of that, someone listening right now might take that first real step toward freedom. To everyone tuning in, if Kevin's words hit home, reach out. Check him out at lifewizardcoach.com, or you can hit him up, Kevin at lifewizardcoach.com, and just stop by telling one honest truth about yourself today. Healing doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be real. Kevin, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for being here, for your courage, and for lighting the way. You're welcome back anytime. Until next time, folks, keep it real, keep digging deep, and remember, the messes we avoid are the ones that end up owning us. Face them. You'll come out stronger. Uncle Jimmy's podcast out. Thank you so much, Kev.
All right, buddy.
Peace and love. Peace and love.
All right, man. Thank you so much.